right, in this video, we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So remember the quadratic formula from your prior experience in math. You should have been exposed to this. The quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and all of that is over 2a. And this is going to hold true provided your quadratic equation is in standard form before beginning the process. And standard form is going to mean we are in a form that looks like ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So everything is on one side of the equation, arranged from highest power to lowest power, and zeros on the other side. All right, so let's give this a shot and see if we remember some things about the quadratic formula. So looking at example A, we want to bring everything to one side of the equation and set it equal to 0. Let's do that over here. So z squared. Let's add that 8z and add that 19. Set that equal to 0. So I'm solving for z, and I might try to factor this, but there's nothing that I can multiply to make 19. It will also yield 8 if I add it together. So I am pretty much stuck with using the quadratic formula or completing the square if you know how to do that. All right, so let's walk through it using the quadratic formula. Z will equal negative b, and b is 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 19. And that's all over 2 times a, and a is 1. So let's take a second and clean up what's underneath the radical. 8 squared is 64, minus 4 times 1 times 19. I think 4 times 19 is 76. So I've got 64 minus 76, and that's going to be negative 12. So what we have is negative 8 plus or minus the square root of negative 12. That's all over 2. Well, the square root of negative 12 is the same as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 12, and the square root of negative 1 is I. And then if we break the square root of 12 into two factors, we've got 4 and 3, 4 being a perfect square, so I can say that this is 2I square root of 3. So what I have here is negative 8 plus or minus 2I square root of 3 all over 2. Now we're taking these two pieces, negative 8, and dividing it by 2, and the 2I square root of 3 and dividing it by 2. And so we'll end up with our final answer of negative 4 plus or minus I square root of 3. Okay, not bad at all. All right, so this next example, we are going to first make sure that we are in standard form. We're not. We're going to have to multiply this through and move this negative 10 to the left-hand side. So let's start there. So we've got t squared minus 6t plus 10 is equal to 0. Now we're ready to apply the quadratic formula. T will equal negative b, and b is negative 6, so that's going to be negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 10. And that's all going to be over 2a, which is 1. All right, let's think about what's under the radical. I've got negative 6 times negative 6, which is 36, minus 4 times 1 times 10, which is 40. So 36 minus 40 is negative 4. So what I really have here is t is equal to 6 plus or minus square root of negative 4 all over 2. Well, remember that the square root of negative 4 is equal to the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 4, which is I times the square root of 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. So that's just going to be 2i. So we have 6 plus or minus 2i, all divided by 2. And again, we're going to take both pieces of the numerator and divide them by the denominator. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And 2i divided by 2 is just I. So our answer here is 3 plus or minus I. And I hope that helped you.